Good morning, YouTube School of Light, everyone out there. Today is the 3rd of January, and we are in the chapter 15, and we'll also read 16 in the book of Deuteronomy. I'll tell you a little bit about School of Light. We're correspondence mail Bible study. So if you want to have a Bible study for you, for everyone from 4 years old through adult, multiple series of studies and in multiple languages. So if you would like a study that you can follow at home, please let me know and we'll send you one. All right, chapter 15. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor should cancel the loan he has made to his fellow Israelite. He shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite or brother, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. You may require payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt your brother owes you. However, there should be no poor among you. For in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you if only you fully obey the Lord your God and are careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised, and he will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. If there is a poor man among your brothers in any of the towns of the land the Lord your God has given you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will toward your needy brother and give him nothing. He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Okay, so for a while there, I was thinking, okay, if I borrow money from you today, that it would be 7 years from the day I borrowed it, and kind of like the American credit system or the FICA system or whatever. But it's not. It's every 7 years. So if I borrowed it from you the day before, literally, under God's rule, you just have to kind of forget about it. And that's why he says here, he says, now, if a poor man comes to you, don't be tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend him. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year for canceling debts is near, so that you will not show ill will towards your needy brother and give him nothing. He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to him, and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your land. If a fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, sells himself to you and serves you for 6 years, in the 7th year you must let him go free, and then you release him. Do not send him away empty-handed. Supply him liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. That is why I give you this command today. But if your servant says to you, I do not want to leave you, because he loves you and your family and is well off with you, then take an awl, and push it through his ear lobe into the door, and he will become your servant for life. Do the same for your maidservant. Do not consider it a hardship to set your servant free, because his service to you these 6 years has been worth twice as much as that of a hired hand. And the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. Set apart the Lord your God every firstborn male of your herds and flocks. Do not put the firstborn of your oxen to work, and do not shear the firstborn of your sheep. Each year you and your family are to eat them in the presence of the Lord your God at the place he will choose. If an animal has a defect, it is lame or blind, or has any serious flaw, you must not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You are to eat it in your own towns. Both the ceremonially unclean and the clean may eat it, as if it were a gazelle or deer, but you must not eat the blood, pour it out on the ground like water. chapter 16. Oh, that's 15. I said, was it going to read 15 and 16? Yes. Observe the month of Abib and celebrate the Passover of the Lord your God, because in the month of Abib he brought you up out of Egypt by night. Sacrifice as the Passover to the Lord your God an animal from your flock or herd at the place the Lord will choose as a dwelling for his name. Do not eat it with bread made with yeast, but for 7 days eat unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, because you left Egypt in haste, so that all the days of your life you may remember the time of your departure from Egypt. Let no yeast be found in your possession in all of your land for 7 days. Do not let any of the meat you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain till the morning. You must not sacrifice the Passover in any town the Lord your God gives you, except the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name. There you must sacrifice the Passover in the evening when the sun goes down on the anniversary of your departure from Egypt. Roast it and eat it at the place the Lord your God will choose. Then in the morning return to your tents. For 6 days eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day hold an assembly to the Lord your God, and do no work. Count off 7 weeks from the time you began to put the sickle to the standing grain. Then celebrate the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God by giving a freewill offering and portion to the blessing the Lord your God has given you, and rejoice before the Lord your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name. You, your sons and your daughters, your men servants and your maidservants, Levites in your towns, and the aliens and the fatherless and the widows living among you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and follow carefully these decrees. Celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and your winepress. Be joyful at your feast, you, your sons and your daughters, men servants and maidservants, and the Levites, the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns. For 7 days celebrate the feast of the Lord your God at the place the Lord will choose. For the Lord your God will bless you in all your harvest and in all the work of your hands, and your joy will be complete. 3 times a year all your men must appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. No man should appear before the Lord empty-handed. Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you. Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land your God has given you. Do not set up any wooden Asherah poles beside the altar you build to the Lord your God, and do not erect a sacred stone, for these the Lord your God hates. Okay, so the year, or chapter 15, was the canceling of debts and the treatment of releasement of slaves, or the treatment of slaves. If one didn't want to be released, then you put a awl through his ear and into your door. I guess that symbolized that he belongs in your house in a way. And I guess what I found kind of interesting is you had some people that were just giving themselves into slavery. And I understand that, like, who was it? Edison, I think he was a indentured servant. And so these guys were more like indentured servants, it seems like. And then there's a verse that says, let him go, whatever, because he has served you twice as valuable as a hired hand, because he was your slave. And I don't know if it's twice as valuable because he cost less, or because this guy's there all the time. I think it might have more to do with him being there all the time. And then we go into, okay, that was the freeing of the servants. The firstborn, set apart the firstborn male of your herds and flocks. And then chapter 16, it reflects on the time that God brought him out of Egypt in the month of Abib. And it looks like this is the beginning of a feast. And then after that, you have the Feast of Weeks. 7 weeks from the time you began to put the sickle of the standing grain. You rejoice in this. You take in your grain. And your sons, your daughters, men servants, maid servants, Levites, and towns that the fatherless will live in. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and follow carefully these decrees. The Feast of Tabernacles, um, basically the whole assembly, everyone from sons, daughters, men servants, maid servants, and Levites, the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns. For 7 days celebrate the feast of the Lord. For the Lord your God will bless you in all your harvest, and all your work of your hands, and your joy will be complete. 3 times a year, all your men must appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of weeks, and the feast of tabernacles. So those was three feasts. And then like the very last two parts where it says, "Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous." Look at our governmental leaders nowadays. It's not even nowadays. You could say back at least 50 years easy, even further than that probably. And then the last part, it says, "Do not set up any Asherah poles. Do not erect a sacred stone, for the Lord your God hates these." So don't put up some kind of a idol that you're gonna put before God. You know, there's always so much when the Bible like repeats a certain theme, it's important. And a big theme that it repeats is, do not worship anything, anyone from the highest heavens to in the seas. Do not worship it. It's a created thing. Worship God only. Love him with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, and all your soul. And it's so important. It's repeated over and over and over. Do not worship other gods, for the Lord your God is a jealous God. Imagine if you were married, right? And the relationship is what you're jealous for. Yeah, you love the person, you're jealous for them maybe, but it's that relationship, what you guys share. Now, women, imagine this is your husband, and he says, "You know what? We're married, but I'm gonna go cleave unto another lady." How would that make you feel? Or if this was the husband, the lady says, "You know what? I'll be back a couple months, 6 months or whatever, but I'm gonna go cleave to another man." How would that make you feel, husbands? Same thing, but on a much more passionate level. God is your husband. You know, whenever I sin, we sin, we're being unfaithful. And the jealousy that he feels is be similar to the same jealousy you would feel, husband, if your wife said, "Hey, I'll be back in 6 months. I'm going to go play around and cleave with another guy." Or you wives, if your husband said, "You know what? It's been great. I love you. But there's this other girl that I'm going to cleave to for a little while, but I'll be back." So that's all I'm going to end it. I'm trying to keep these between 15 and 20 minutes. We're at 13 minutes now. I think we did a good review on 15 and 16. And I always recommend go through it again. Read it yourself. Read it out loud, especially. Happy 2019, everybody. God bless. Have a good day.